Mm. Hello, my name is Lynn Wilson. On behalf of Carole Heaney, a first-time children's book author and publisher, I want to welcome you to this evening's virtual book launch of The Cardinal's Gift. Carole wears many hats. She's a mom, a nonna, a wife, a friend, a nurse, a coach, a teacher, and much more. And as you will hear this evening, she's really passionate about being a healing presence in the lives of all that come in contact with her. And now, with this book, the capacity to be that presence in the world. So I've known Carole for more than 15 years. We first met when we worked together on the leadership team of a system-wide project in a large healthcare system. And then later we worked together in the hospice and palliative care organization. It turns out we also have other shared non-work interests, mostly creative in nature. So if you know Carole, you know an in-person book launch would have been a very festive occasion. Definitely a cardinal theme, plenty of red balloons, coordinating napkins, festive food, thoughtful gifts for all in attendance. And Carole would have given a reading from her book. There would have been plenty of meaningful conversation, the opportunity for you to have your own copy of The Cardinal's Gift autographed by the author, and likely you would have made some new friends and much more. However, one of the silver linings of COVID is the ability to use this virtual platform to reach many more people, especially those who would not normally be able to join Carole in person. So tonight, I can promise you there will be drawings for thoughtfully curated gifts. Winners will be selected from the folks who engage with us in the chat. Carole will read from her book, and there will absolutely be meaningful conversation about hope, healing, and grief with Carole and her two special guests, Joan Newton O'Gorman and Tara Hempel. Joan is an end-of-life spiritual care advisor with a hospice in Vermont. She's been a spiritual leader of multiple churches and has a delightful ability to create connection with others, literally anywhere. Taxi cabs, as a cooking show host, and even as the sample lady at Costco. And Tara is a licensed clinical social worker practicing with Jewish Family Services of Northeastern New York. I first met Tara when she served as a pediatric bereavement specialist with the hospice that we both worked with. One outstanding memory I have of Tara is her incredible passion for the magic that's created during the annual Camp Aaron weekends for grieving children. As you're about to hear, all three of these women really know their way around the possibilities of healing through grief and of the possibilities of finding hope on that journey. You all are an important part of the conversation tonight, so we invite you to chat with us, share your reactions, ask questions of all of the speakers. I'll be over in the chat talking with you, passing your questions and comments along to Carole, Joan, and Tara. We'll share resources with you in the chat as well. And just a reminder, those wonderfully, thoughtfully curated prizes, people who chat will automatically be entered into the random prize drawings. So we will notify winners by chat. So let's get started in chat. Where is everybody joining us from tonight? And now, Carole, congratulations on this very special evening, the launch of your first children's book. One thing I wonder about is loss is a tough topic for people to talk about. So why this topic of hope and grief, and why now?
Well, thank you, Lynn. That was a beautiful introduction. I want to say thank you to Lynn Wilson because she's been by my side for months around this book and book launching and so supportive. Thank you, Lynn. I love you dearly. And I do want to add that we have this little treat here that came, and it is not your traditional balloon. It is a balloon with a cardinal in a tree. And I have to say the talents of Belinda Jenny at Jenny Balloons created this beautiful little sculpture. So it wasn't really balloons, it was art. So anyway, thank you. Welcome everyone. I am really excited that you're all here. This has been amazing working up to this right now, and being able to sort of put this pause in this whole process to share with you why it is meaningful for me and why I think it would be meaningful for the world. And Lynn asked, why this book, why now? And honestly, I have to answer that by saying I did not plan a day or time. This seed was planted for me 26 years ago when a dear friend, she was actually a colleague and a mentor when I was in graduate school, who took me under her wing. She is a guru of advanced nursing practice, and her name is Judy Spross. And I remember telling her this story because I was proceeding to finish my graduate degree after my husband died, and I needed to get it done. And she was the person that I connected with to do an internship. And when I met her and we talked about our stories, et cetera, and I shared with her my Cardinal story, she immediately said to me, "You need to put that in a children's book." And I thought, I don't ever know that I will be able to write a children's book. Now, of course, you have to understand that Judy is a prolific writer. She's written textbooks on advanced nursing practice, she's sort of the guru in that world. And so it was nothing for her to think of saying, just write a book. So I planted the seed back here a little bit. And then I decided that eventually maybe that would happen. I don't know. As time went on, what really happened was I was engaging with other people who had similar stories, who had insights and connections with, hummingbirds and butterflies and clouds and rainbows, and how powerful the healing was for them in all of that. So I didn't give it much more thought until I always wanted the story in writing for my children, but I didn't give it much more thought until I was diagnosed with cancer. And then I thought, okay, now I have to get this in writing for sure for my kids. So time went on, didn't happen. But then I had grandkids. And then other things motivated me to think about this in a more serious way. And I think most of that was the idea that this experience that I had, this is the story that I had as an adult. And I translated it into a story from a 9-year-old girl. One, because I feel like 9-year-old girls are moving into a part of the world that's really powerful. And when they have a sense of themselves, it really matters in who they become as adults. And I chose the character Rachel because that's my mother's middle name. And then I decided, okay, it's time. The pandemic hit and I thought, what am I waiting for? I'm not getting any younger. And now I have grandchildren in the picture. So why wouldn't I want this out there for my grandchildren? So the process began. And I have to say, what it's come full circle for me is that at the time when my husband was diagnosed, there was no surgery, no chemotherapy, no radiation to treat his disease. So we had to begin looking 26 years ago at alternatives and complementary therapies. And that was all new to me. I had my world, I was trained as a nurse in Western medicine. And so that my world around healing looked very different. Then this experience with the Cardinal actually awakened me, not just literally, but spiritually. It created a paradigm shift in my world about what healing was really about. It was a ripple effect to actually see that my husband died healed, but he did not die cured. And it gave me insight that we can be healed and not be cured, but we can be cured and never be whole or healed. So healing, that message of healing that I was awakened to was it comes from within. It isn't something that someone does to us. It's something that comes from within. And that message of healing rippling out to the world, no better place for it to be than through children. And I felt, why not write children's stories that promote healing from within? So as they grow and as that ripples in their lives, and as adults, they identify their own capacity for healing, whatever that might look like for them. And of course, we would like to be healed and cured, but it probably starts with being healed first and being whole. So this story really resonated for me as I finished the writing and the illustrations and so forth, in bringing full circle the idea that healing is, if I can be of healing service to myself and to others, then I am able to be a part of the world in a way that is loving, caring, and uh, nurturing. And what better way than through children's stories? So when I had to make the decision about, do I publish? Do I traditionally publish? Do I hybrid publish? And or do I self-publish? I created my own publishing company called Healing Press. And my mission is to be of healing service to myself and others through children's stories, as well as through my work with adults and coaching. And it can ripple out to the world in however way it needs to. So my grandchildren were very instrumental in helping me with this final writing of this book. And it was the most delightful thing for me to be able to involve them in that. Both the manuscript, when I would read that to them before I had any, serious illustrations, black and whites, etc., they would give me a little advice. Nona, have her put a shadow here, or Nona, what about this? Or they would suddenly get it, and you would see that they got it. And so their contributions, I'm 5-year-olds, 7, 8-year-olds, 9-year-olds who were able to get that message really reinforced for me how important this was. And so, and in addition, I'll just acknowledge that our granddaughter, Mia Mendez, she was the reference for Rachel's, uh, illustrations. The balloon just popped in my ear. I'm sure you all heard that. She was the reference for my illustrator to create Rachel, and she did a beautiful job. And there's a picture of one of my illustration of one of my grandsons in there as well. But that was fun to be able to do and involve them with. And our next story is coming, and that will also involve them. So the idea that this is really about healing for myself and for others is really the message of this book. And I find that if we can engage ourselves in our surroundings, being present, Mother Nature, those gifts are always available to us if we just pay attention. And so I'd like to read a little bit from the story. And I think that Richard is going to put that up on screen in a second. But before we do that, I really would like to light a candle. And I'd like to light a candle in memory of anyone that you might have thought about as you were reading this book, or that you thought about giving the book to, or someone that you love or care about, in memory or in honor of them. And so that we can do that with the light of those heavenly guides and spirit guides that are surrounding us and who have surrounded me for a long, long time through this journey, and continue to every day, including finding a balloon lady. Let's see if we can get this light lit. We have a little funky wick here. Okay, so I'm going to read. I'll see if this stays lit. It might not. That's okay if it doesn't. We'll send all of our light there out into the world if this doesn't light. Here it is, the light of the world. Okay. All right. Are you ready for a little bit of a reading now? And of course, I'll be reading from here, and you'll see it on the screen. And I need to put out a kudo to my illustrator, Marlo Garnsworthy, who really, from the very beginning, understood and got what I was trying to accomplish. And she did so through she's a children's book illustrator. She does scientific illustrations as well as children's stories, and very talented. And I'm so glad that I was able to connect with her for this book. So here we go. So I just want to acknowledge some people really important for me. I mentioned Judy and my dear friend Kate Koss, who supported me through this ad nauseum, listening and manuscript editing, et cetera, et cetera. But to my husband, Tom Riemann, And my late husband was Tom, and my current husband is Tom. So just so you're not confused by that. Every time I would say to him, what do you think of this? Or what do you think of that? I was waiting for the eye roll, and he would just stop and he would listen and he would say, okay, let's take a look. And I cannot tell you the number of times that I did that. So, honey, thank you so much for your support and all of this. It was amazing and continues to be so. I wanted to thank my older grands, Jack Morris, Noah Morris, Casper Heaney, and Mia Mendez, because they were wonderful reviewers. They were great guides, and they also were excellent listeners. So thank you so much for that. And my book is dedicated to my son and daughter, Kelly and Michael. And as I thought of them throughout the writing of this book, and I thought the importance of our memories creating a forever home in our hearts of our loved ones, and that I wish for them that this book does that for them as well. So love you both. Okay, first page. Okay. Rachel was going to be late for the school bus again. Hiding under her quilt, she heard Mom's voice. Rachel, please get ready for school. You will miss the bus. You can't keep doing this every day, Mom pleaded. Then she added, I can't take you to school again. I'll be late for work. Mom was impatient with her these days. Ever since Daddy died, Rachel didn't want to get up in the morning, let alone go to school. Reading her favorite books or watching TV was hard. At times, she didn't even want to play with her friends, and other times she did. Her thoughts were so confused. Mom's stern voice echoed up the stairs. Rachel, the bus is almost here. Rachel threw on her clothes and quickly ran down the steps. She would miss breakfast again. Rachel struggled to pay attention to the teacher and stared blankly out the window. Suddenly, she heard the teacher calling her name over and over. Oh, she wanted to curl under her desk and hide. She missed that safe feeling of her quilt and couldn't wait to go home. Rachel never knew what to say to her friends. They tried to cheer her up, but she hasn't been much fun. The next morning, there was new snow on the Green Mountains and frost on the windows. The cold made it even harder to come out from under her quilt. Just a little longer, she mumbled, enjoying the warmth and quiet here. She could remember more about Daddy in this cozy space, things she was so afraid she would forget. As she lay there, a tapping came from the window. She pulled her pillow over her head, but the sound grew louder. Tap, tap, tap. Rachel groaned at the noises and whispered, Go away. The tapping wouldn't stop, so Rachel went to the window to find a cardinal flapping its wings, banging its beak against the glass. She knocked hard on the window. Go away, noisy bird. She startled the cardinal, and he flew away. Rachel jumped back into bed and let the quilt hug her. The quiet helped her think. Tap, tap, tap. He's back. Shoo, shoo, she called out. From downstairs, she heard Mom say, Rachel, are you dressed yet? Late again, Rachel rushed into the bathroom to wash her face. Tap, tap, tap came from the window. What's going on? Rachel pulled back the curtain and could not believe her eyes. The bathroom window was on the other side of the house from her bedroom. How did he get here so fast? Rachel wondered as he danced in the window. She banged on the glass and off he went. Rachel, downstairs, now. The bus is here, cried Mom. We have to make Mom out to be the bad guy, right? Okay, so that's just a little bit. And I want to take a minute to introduce, you've been introduced by Lynn to Joan and to Tara, and I'm so grateful that they joined us. And just a few little comments that Joan, I've known Joan for years and years, long before this actually happened. And she was very much a part of supporting us through my husband's illness, his death, and our grieving, and doing just knowing what to do and what to say. And I'm so grateful to her for that. And she also was involved in marrying our daughter, which I'm very grateful for as well. So, Noah, this is the person who married mommy and daddy. I just wanted you to know that. Anyway, so Joan, thank you for being here. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
And I think I'll just start with you, Joan, in getting a reaction, and then we'll bring up Tara.
Okay,
I just love to hear what your reaction is to what you heard here.
Yes.
And based on your experience in the work that you do, what tips that you might be able to share with people around your insights related to this?
Thank you so much. And thank you, Carole, for inviting me to be part of not only this process of looking at the book before it was completed, of being here tonight with this wonderful gathering, but as you mentioned, for when we first met. And some of what I was thinking about tonight is it probably was about a month or so before Tom died that he and I had lunch together. I invited him up to my house in Arlington, and we had lunch together, and that rich connection that continues. And I guess what I want to respond to tonight is around connections, because especially as I'm reading in the chat, I was reading Courtney's chat message about whenever she sees a cardinal, it reminds her of her father. And so that connection. And then two more responses. It was Alyssa and Meg saying, and whenever I see a cardinal, I'm reminded of my mother. And so this richness, this is such an incredible book. The front of the book talks about a true story of finding hope in grief, but it's really this incredible, in addition, a story about finding connections in our grieving, finding connections in the various ways, regardless of whether we are children, adolescents, adults, in whatever stage of life developmentally, that we make this journey through our healing. So I guess what I just want to talk about just for this moment, because I know we'll be back and we also want to meet Tara, is the richness of the connections that are being made tonight that have come about because of all the connections that you have brought together, Carole. All the people that you've brought together, this story that you've brought that's connecting all of us, and that will continue to move us into the future as we read this book and are connected in our own unique ways to the grief that we work through and the ways that we find hope and healing in the midst of the grief. So connection and gratitude. Thank you.
Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Yes, I think the healing piece of this is anytime we can open up a conversation to allow for an emotion, a feeling to be shared, we are promoting healing and we are taking care of ourselves. And we may not want to hear that someone's sad. We may not want to hear that someone is upset, but listening allows for that to be validated by other people. So thank you so much for your words. Thank you. And
Thank you,
Tara.
Hello.
There's Tara. Hi, Tara.
Hello, everyone.
Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So, what are your reactions to what you heard, and in your own professional experience in terms of healing conversations, but where Rachel is and her mom and all of that?
From that very first page with Rachel lying in the bed with her expression, how it is, how she's clinging to her little purple elephant stuffed animal, the photos on the wall. This book is such a powerful tool to really open up conversations within anyone's family. It's a powerful book for young kids, older kids, even teens. Read it together as a family. It inspires hope and healing for everyone. And I just love that healing, grief in general, there's no right or wrong way to grieve. Everyone experiences grief so differently. And this book gives everyone permission to grieve how they need to, how they want to. There's no right or wrong way to do it. There's a hint of a little frustration, come on, we got to get to school. Mom's frustrated. She's grieving too. She's going through a lot. Rachel's grieving. She doesn't want to get out of bed. I don't want to get out of bed. All these things. And the message is that we're all struggling. We're all in this together. And then as the book continues, you see more hope, you see more inspiration, you see more healing. And I love how this could be used to open up that conversation about how do I feel? How do you feel? It's all correct. It's all right. We're all going to show and express it differently. And that's a good
Yes.
thing. And that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes. Yeah. That's great. I also agree that I see this too, where other children can get a sense of how they might see a friend who's grieving, how they might feel. What is that like for them?
That's
And
right.
how might they support them? They might not know how. And you see in the picture where her friends are just sort of, they don't know
Yes.
what to
That's right.
do.
Right.
They're
Exactly. They
so
don't know
they
what to
need
say.
they
There's some whispering. There's the
right.
two boys that are kind of like, "Ooh, I'm going to lean a little bit this way because I don't
Right.
want to I don't want to
Yeah.
say something to upset my friend. I might want to ask how she's doing, but I don't want to bring up things that might make her cry in the middle of a school day." We could talk
Right.
about that too, how to support a friend that's grieving, what to say, how to say it, and also how Rachel might be feeling. She's kind of alone at
Mhm.
lunch,
Mhm.
and here they are wanting to support her, but she's kind of looking out the window. So how would we approach someone that looks that way? If they're grieving, or maybe we don't know what's going on. So how could we talk to our friends and support our friends?
So any
Right.
tips on that, Joan and Tara, on for a young person, how to support their friend?
I always say include them as much as you can. Always, come sit with me, or hey, what's that you're eating? Just any way to try to engage that person in conversation. Definitely asking, how are you feeling? Is there anything I can help with? I've had clients share with me that sometimes people have offered a hug and that was very comforting, or sometimes they might not want a hug
Mhm.
and they might say, no, no, thanks. And just to be like,
Right.
okay, no problem. Do you still want
Mhm.
to sit with me? Do you want to
Mhm.
color together? So just
Mhm.
Right.
engaging as much as possible. That presence is so powerful. You don't
Mhm.
always have to talk about the loss to show you
Right.
care.
Mhm.
Right,
Mhm.
right, absolutely. I totally agree with what you've just said, Tara, and everything that you've said. And I know in the introduction for you, Tara, we share something in terms of bereavement camp for families and children.
Oh, wonderful. Yes.
We have a camp through my hospice here in the Burlington area called Camp Knock Knock. And it's an
Wonderful.
annual camp, and it's the first weekend in June. And we bring in about 20 families every year, and all ages, all ages. I mean, it can be babies and toddlers that come.
That's right.
And we have professionals from the community who come and offer support for all ages. And what we see is that the opportunity is there to swim, to do all of the so-called normal things that you would
That's right.
do at camp, right? Kind of normalizing that, but also opportunities for families in their own ways developmentally to have time to be able to share. And so I think that is also kind of my response to your question, Carole, around, how do we do this? Always kind of being attuned to what is it that the other person is presenting with as a need.
Mhm.
And whether it is a hug or not a hug, but just to acknowledge that we are there, acknowledging that there is a loss, that we talk about this,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and just being present. And this book, any book that really allows, especially younger or our children, to be able to have grief spoken about at their particular developmental level,
Mhm.
just opens something up, because it doesn't have to be, they're not talking about themselves.
Right.
They're talking about
Right.
Rachel.
Right, right, right. I was just going to ask you both a question about children, and because even in my own family, and then friends who have just had losses, and the children are wondering, what's happening. And I know different age groups you approach differently. So, say for example, if a school age child has just experienced the loss of a cousin or an aunt or a family member, what are some good approaches for parents in how to just breach that conversation?
I love what Joan had said, and also there's a Carol in the chat saying, I don't think grief ends. And I'm just going to tie those two pieces together because I love those in response to
Yes.
your question, Carol.
Yeah.
So, no matter what the age, we do grieve that loss. So, Joan had mentioned like toddlers, babies, absolutely, they might not be able to articulate what they're feeling, what they're experiencing, but they're going to miss that person's touch. They're going to miss that person's smell. So if you think of little babies, they're going to miss the way that person held them and spoke to them and sang to them. And I totally agree, Carole, in chat through Facebook. It doesn't end. It transforms. I always say it starts off usually with it being very painful, cutting very deep, very hard. And the waves, the emotions, the waves are big and they crash and they can often be debilitating and hit us out of nowhere unexpectedly at the grocery store, at work, whatever we're doing. And eventually those waves get smaller and they turn to more bittersweet. So of course we still love and miss our person. And of course that still hurts, but it turns to a bittersweet situation. And then eventually a welcomed, wanted reminder of them when the cardinal taps on that window. We want to think of daddy. We want to be reminded of him. So for anyone of any age, they are definitely going to experience grief, and each different developmental stage does experience grief in different ways. I know as adults, we like to talk about it. We want to open the conversation. And sometimes they're more like Rachel. They might not be ready to talk about it, but mom's willing to talk about it. And that's what matters. Mom is saying, I'm here if you want to talk. And Rachel might just want to be in her bed with the covers. But as she comes out to play, and that I know is on later pages in the book, but there is a page, a beautiful page where she's dancing and playing. It's so important to stress that even though we're grieving, because that grief does not end, it's okay to play. It's okay to have fun. We can still be happy while we're sad and while we're missing someone.
Yes. Thank you for that, Tara. I'm looking at a comment that Meg has in the chat box right now, and I think also folds into the conversation we're having right now, talking about carrying on the traditions.
I love that.
And again, that goes back to what I was talking about earlier. We carry on the connections, right? I mean, she's talking about cookie cutters and aprons and the fond memories. And so we carry on the traditions. And I'm sure, Carole, you know this so well, that not only through the writing of this book, but embodied in who you are, the grandchildren who never met Tom know him. They're connected with him. And so we carry on that tradition. And I think there is an incredible thread and wave of healing in that.
Yes.
Right? That from generation to generation, the stories are told.
Yes. And I think telling those stories so children have a chance to learn or just get a sense of is really valuable, And I meant, Tara, you started to mention something, and I just want to bring this up again because I know both of you will have a thought about it. So this is a celebration. We have balloons. We have champagne for later. No one's opened the bottle. And we are celebrating something really important, right? Or something really valuable. And we're putting sort of a pause in all of that. So the idea that we're celebrating, and we're still talking about death and grief, and how that fits into the experience of grieving and celebrating, and at the same time we're still grieving, and that those can be happening at the same time. And so if you would speak to that for a minute, I'd appreciate it.
I just think like I said earlier, there's no wrong way to write or grieve. It's complicated, and it can be messy, and it can be many different emotions at once. And I often describe it as like this ball of yarn that's all intertwined. And so there's different colors of yarn that represents different emotions, but it's all knotted and messy and complicated. And actually someone in chat mentioned, can I scroll down? Nancy, who used to work with grieving children, mentioned that it could be really important to ask what they're feeling in that moment and give them the opportunity to think of exactly what is in their heart and mind and help them to express it.
Absolutely.
So they may not have the words, but they definitely are feeling a lot of different things all at once. So giving them the words, and I always say, be vulnerable in front of your children. I have a lot of parents ask me, is it okay to cry? Or they share with me. I try not to cry in front of my kids. I don't want to upset them. But I say, please do. Please share openly with your children, because if you do it, you're giving them permission to share openly as well, whatever they are. All emotions welcome, even anger, guilt, shame, those bigger, heavier more, negative connotations, emotions. Those aren't negative. Those aren't bad. There's nothing wrong with any of that.
Right.
Right, right. One of the illustrations I love is the one in the classroom where Rachel's kind of off to the side and her cohorts don't know what to say or really what to do. But behind there on the wall, there's a poster with adjectives on it. And so in that illustration, I find that invitation to the adjectives are happy, big, angry, that the adjectives are there so that we are saying to anyone who is grieving, and we're all grieving in one way or another, saying there are words that we can be using. We will honor what your feelings are, the nouns that are there, father, ice cream, train. What are the words and the feelings that you associate with the person you're grieving? And so sometimes we can't go as deep yet as we will in our grieving, right? And I know there's been, kudos for years ago for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and her stages of grief, but I think we know that, stages are one way of framing it. I know some of my training years ago was it's like a spiral staircase.
Yeah.
You go up a little bit, but you're coming around to the same, you're going around and around to the same place. And I just want to reference back to what you talked about in terms of Carole saying about we're celebrating. Were you sure the balloon popped or was it the champagne cork?
No, that was a balloon popping. Not sure what happened, but it did.
Just saying.
Yeah,
Just saying.
yeah.
Okay.
And I would mention that too, what you just said about the spiral staircase there. We have no screen. So I'm talking, but I'm not sure if we have people on the screen. Okay. So this idea that things spiral, they do. They just don't. It's not linear. None of it's linear, right? But the idea that children can be in a moment and they see the people around them are sad, and there's a perception that they should be too, and they really are just ready to go out and play, and that they just really need to be told it's okay. Go ahead. Right. They don't attach to those emotions in the same way adults do. And so when a child is experiencing that, like, okay, we'll move on now. Okay, move on. It's okay.
That's right.
Keep going. But it's interesting because I think that gives a message when we don't have to belabor this constantly, but we do want to identify, share, give permission to children to say, man, this hurts. This hurts a lot. I don't know what to do with it. It hurts so much. And even in the book, I tried to just demonstrate that she's slowly getting a little bit more engagement, but then boom, she starts to regain, come back to this. It still hurts, mommy. It didn't go away. Right.
Yeah. Right.
So I think that being really important as well. I was thinking more as well about the fact that young toddlers. I'm thinking about a recent experience in my niece's family, who a mom had a stillbirth, and all the other children were expecting, of course, to have a baby come home, and the baby didn't come home, and how that not having a relationship with someone who is not there, but was anticipated to be there. And what I'm thinking about in all of this is that losses can look like many things. They don't have to look just around death as a loss.
Right.
Any change is a loss. I see it as, point A to point B. And then in the middle, there's this transformation or this meaning that we get from whatever that change is. I lived here at this address and now I live here at that address. Well, that's all well and good. But in the meantime, you've left behind friends. You've left behind maybe your church. You've met all kinds of things change. So we need to find meaning with them. But COVID is a perfect example. We've had so much loss in COVID, not just death, but clearly jobs, et cetera. And I'd love for you to speak about that a little bit, because I'm sure you've encountered it in terms of your bereavement work.
At our agency, this has been a constant theme for 20 months now, what we call the 3 losses. All the deaths from the pandemic, all the deaths that are not pandemic related, and all the other losses.
Yes.
And so for the last 20 months, we have been talking not only as staff and cohorts, but also with all of our families about the three major losses, and acknowledging that loss is loss, regardless of what kind of box or category we try to put it into. But that acknowledging that this past 20 months has had a major impact on us emotionally, mental health, spiritually, and on the grieving process. And on the grieving process for our families who have not been able to do the rituals. And that has been something that I have seen as a hospice spiritual caregiver, not being able to do the rituals that offered such comfort. And so part of what we are discussing as spiritual caregivers and bereavement coordinators at our agency is, what are we going to be seeing 6 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, in terms of the impact that this whole time has had on not being able to, I'm going to say, like, normalize some of the rituals that have helped us come through the grieving process.
Right.
So I think that would be my response, Carole, to your question and how I'm experiencing that right now.
Yeah, definitely. How about you, Tara?
And I'm going to quote Courtney in chat. She just wrote, "The loss of our old life as we knew it before COVID." And that's just so beautifully put. So yes, it's still loss, it's still grief, and there's still so many unknowns, which makes it very scary for children, adults, anyone of any age. We're all waiting. Like, when are we going to get back to normal? Is this the new normal? Is this how it's going to be? We still don't know. And are there going to be additional variants, additional waves, additional loss, and how, and are we going to find, better ways of infrastructure and everything else? So there's a lot of things still up in the air. There's a lot of questions. And I think we're all coping the best we can. Same with children in school. They have loss of sitting with their friends at lunchtime. They have loss of changing classes because they have to sit in the same classroom all the time. So there's loss all around. We're all grieving. There's a lot of change.
And so what comes to mind for me in all of that is that acknowledging the loss, but then I also think on the other side of that is, with loss and healthy grieving and healing through our conversations and our being with one another and so forth, comes resilience. And so where does resilience fit in when we look at grief and bereavement, loss? I feel that that's, can be one of the strongest ways that we can benefit through loss, is in how it's a way of enriching us with ways to be resilient. Any thoughts about that?
When working with children and families, I like to ask what inspires you, what motivates you, what gives you strength, but also what brings you comfort and joy and peace. And rather than suggesting ways of self-care, I like to ask, what do you like to do to relax, to feel energized, and everything in between? So I love how in this story, the Cardinal starts getting her out of bed, starts getting her moving. She gets excited. Like, what is he doing tapping on that glass? What does he want? Let's set a bird feeder out. Maybe he's hungry, but it gets her invested and interested in something else. So it's kind of like slowly pulling her out a little bit and getting her interested, where she's a point in her life where even her favorite books and her friends, like, nothing is of interest because she's hurting so much. She might be feeling numb. She might be feeling sad. And now she's very curious about this Cardinal. So what does that for people? What kind of gets them out of their shell and pulls them out? What do you have to look forward to? And I know that's a very tricky question too with COVID. Like, we can't really do vacations right now. We can't visit all our friends and family right now. But what really brings us joy and peace?
Yeah. How about you, Joan?
Yes, I'm actually tagging right on to what Tara was saying, because that resilience really began to show itself in Rachel getting up earlier in the morning when summer came, playing with her friends, finding some joy. And also, I love this piece about she shared her feelings with other kids who had lost a parent. That bringing into the story that Rachel has had an experience that that is showing her resilience and offering that to other kids. And that most of the time these things helped Rachel feel better. So again, I go back to that theme constantly around connection. So she didn't only just experience this for herself, but that she is taking that, as you did, Carole, taking the experience of grief and connecting it so that others can find that resilience that is being witnessed and manifest. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think the idea that when we here was a huge message for me in this process, and not, I don't even mean immediately. I just meant through the layering and the depth of my own healing and being able to recognize the layers of grief, but that at first it's just all about what we lost. A love that was lost, a person, a connection, a presence, all of that we lost.
Right.
But then as we talk more about how that affects us, we also see that it opens us up to more. It actually, in my case, I feel as if I was able to actually open my heart in a loving way that I never would have imagined otherwise. And as I said earlier, that this was a huge shift for me in terms of how I looked at healthcare, nursing, my practice, everything. But the biggest is how I was able to, and slowly, it's not I'll mention this in a minute, but it's not a period. It's a pause. It's a comma. It's an ellipse. And Joan and Terry, you can speak to that. But the idea that you then can step back and say, what has this experience really brought in my life? And I know that we all hear things about the hard things in life are where we gain our most insight and where we get our most meaningful lessons and experiences that teach us that resilience, right? So I feel very strongly that we can glean from that change, A to B, in the middle, what that meaning is. Even in COVID, I began to ask myself, I would hear this all the time, oh, we just want to get back to normal. We just want to get back to normal. And I kept asking to myself, what is normal? What is that normal anyway? And then maybe, well, what shifted during this period that might create a new normal for us that we want, that we desire? And it came out of that experience of having all of that loss. So just thought, don't know if you have any reaction to that.
One response I have is actually linking back to something Lynn said at the very beginning in the introduction, that if this wasn't a time of COVID, that you'd be in a bookstore tonight, Carole.
I know.
And the line would be out the door.
Yes.
But the line, right down the street, all the way down. But no matter how long that line was, I don't know if it would be including all the people who are, I've seen North Carolina, Tennessee. I know we all love you. I don't know if we would have traveled 610,000 miles to see you.
Great point.
And so, looking into what you just said, this is permitting us to have this kind of an interaction, this kind of a conversation tonight. And so I think we have to. Somebody talked about finding the blessings in the midst of loss. And so to also recognize that and celebrate that. The blessing of just being here, present in the way we are tonight.
Yeah. How about you, Tara? Anything?
It's very similar. Just as the Cardinal was a gift to Rachel, this book, Carole's book, is a gift to all of us. So where are the gifts? What are the gifts? So if someone has passed away, what have they taught us? What memories are we going to carry on? What rituals and celebrations? How do we celebrate their life? How do we carry on those memories? And with the pandemic, what gifts have we received from the pandemic? So now we have much better technology. We're much more comfortable on Zoom. We might be a little zoomed out, but now we're able to connect easily, more frequently with people from afar. So I say, look for those gifts, look for those little, the little hope, the inspirations.
And those moments. And I think in the book, it demonstrates how Rachel doesn't really pay attention at first, right? And
That's
so,
right.
and then the Cardinal literally almost beats her over the head with banging on the glass to get her attention. And because that true is my personal experience, but that sometimes it's right in front of us. It's not far. It's very close. It's all part of the moment that we're in right now. And those healing moments are those moments we're in, whether they're sad ones or happy ones or ones in which we didn't anticipate. They are the moments that we're in, and they have the capacity to ripple throughout our lives, right? So creating that ripple, I think, is so powerful in any opportunity, that any situation where we have had loss. It's it's hard, it's painful, and we know it, and we feel that, and we experience it, and it takes time to get to a point where you can appreciate what that really means in your life. So the thing for me about COVID was, what meaning can we draw from it? We're so quick in this Western culture to put death, loss to bed quickly. 3 days, get the viewing, the burial, everything done. People go back to work too quick because they have no choice. And so we don't leave space and time for that to actually resonate within what's happening in my life. Everything's in chaos right up here. Where are we going to land? And not knowing where you're going to land is probably the most traumatic part, or scary part, fearful part. And so I just ask you, in this, as we move forward in any situation where we are needing space and time, recognizing that for yourself. What are ways in which we can recognize that more time is needed, or we don't have to jump into, look at our bereavement program, our bereavement policies on how long we have to get back to the program again. Come on, you're ready to go. And we all know that isn't really realistic. The fact that we're so ready in the hospice, I would see this, we're so ready to, take that body to the funeral home and we move on. And there is this transition in there. There's this piece that we tend to miss as a result of that. Any thoughts about that?
I think culturally, at least here in America, just death in general is very difficult to talk about. We tend to say phrases like, they passed away, they moved on, they're in a better place. I say no, the better place is here. We want them here. We wish they were, still alive and with us. And so when we're quick to say things, well, at least they're not hurting anymore. That's true, but that doesn't take away from my pain. I'm still hurting because I'm missing them. So we do need to do better with bereavement leave and everything else. And I think books like these really help us open that conversation. And it's not just 3 days we're grieving. It's not just a month. It's grief does not end. There's no point where we're just over it. It does slowly transform into healing and hope and something more inspiring and that connection. But for now, it's a difficult time. So I just say, be gentle with yourself, be kind with yourself, and take care of yourself the best you can.
Around the bereavement, around the question that you've asked, Carole, and that Tara's also responding to. One of the things that we talk about at our hospice is, and I know anybody who's involved in hospice knows there's a hospice benefit for bereavement that continues on for a year after the loss. And I have had so many people say to me, it took me a year to even feel that there was a loss, that and now you're going to leave me. Just when I'm starting to kind of understand and recognize and really feel that depth, and whether that is, some of it is the way our culture handles things, rapidly pushing us to do that, but also one's own timetable, which is always one's own timetable, individually. And so I think I just wanted to note that we all have our own timetable around that.
And I also feel, however, that sometimes we're ready to get back to work because we want a distraction, because we don't want to have to feel what we have to feel. And so it fits very nicely sometimes into our work culture and or whatever that might be, that to not feel or express it. I personally experienced that. My own personal experience was that I wanted to protect my children from feeling badly about anything. So let's just make sure we get right on back into things, as they were, once they were. It's a temptation that's really,
it is.
With good bereavement support, like the two of you would be we'd be less inclined to do so. So we'd be less
Mhm.
inclined to do so.
Mm.
And I just wanted to mention something about the period, the pause, or the
Yeah.
comma, or the ellipses,
Yes.
just to say, give you a chance to speak to that before we, move on. Not sure
Mhm.
where we are in
Mhm.
our time, but um, so just how that someone said it doesn't really end; it changes. But I'd like to hear your
Mhm.
thoughts on that.
I describe it as a journey. There's
Mm.
no time frame. It's not finite. There's no timeline. And there is a lot of societal pressures to get back to work, get back to this, get back to that. And
Hmm.
sometimes we have to push through it, but there
Hmm.
is no one moment like it's like, whew, glad that's over. It
Hmm.
doesn't work
Hmm.
that way.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
it
Mhm.
does transform, it does hurt less, but
Right.
we'll always remember that person.
Hmm.
We'll always love them. So that connection will always remain.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
Great.
to kind of follow up on that in terms of the journey, Carole, ever since the book has been published, I have been telling everyone I know about it. And what I'm also telling
I love you,
folks
Joe.
is, I love you too. What I've been telling folks is this was
Yeah.
many years in the developing, many years in the readiness for it to be birthed.
Yes.
And so I think that just is another link that I just wanted to share, that
Yeah. Yeah.
when the time,
That's
right, when the time is right, the time is right. And
right.
for those of us who all of us are grieving, we're grieving something, somehow, some way. And for those of us who are working with folks who are deeply grieving, I know that the work we're doing is when the time is right, the time is right for
Yeah.
that spiral journey, that piece of the journey, and companioning people exactly where they are.
Right, right. And I'll just comment that when I asked Joan to be a beta reader for the manuscript, she, I said, Joan, it's only taken me 26 years to get this into print. And she said, only 26 years?
Right?
It was
That's it.
just perfect.
Yep.
No, you're right. You're right. You're right. You're
Yep.
right.
That's
Judy
right.
Spross, I see that you just joined us. Hello, love. She was my seed that got planted. She
Uh,
was the person who planted my seed about writing this book. But that is really insightful. I'd love to see if anyone has any questions in the chat for Joan or Tara that we would like to answer. Or I see a lot of wonderful, beautiful comments. And
mm,
I will just speak to my folks, the peeps who work in end of life care and palliative care and hospice. That probably was the most valuable work that I watched being done. My career started in med surg to maternal child health, and then moved
mm,
through oncology to hospice, and it was a natural passage. And now I see programs where we have death doulas. We don't just have birth
yes.
doulas, we
I
have
love
death
that.
doulas, people who are attending in a different way, but are supporting through the process, just as our professionals do in hospice, in end of life care and palliative care. And those are some of the most valuable moments people will have in their lives, is being with someone at the time of their death. So
Yes.
and I say this, from the deepest part of my heart, that we never want to lose a loved one. But it's also the other part that we're learning, that this Western culture has always struggled with, and thinking that death is an option, right? And it isn't. It's going to happen. But at the same time, how do we lay the
Mm,
groundwork for others, young people, whomever, to understand that piece of it in a way that's healing and supportive? And we can't take away their pain. We can't take away their suffering, but we can be present to be
mhm,
in an empathetic way, to be
mhm,
of support. I had Joan, Kate Koss, wonderful people who supported me and our family over the years. And I have to say, it changes your life in ways I cannot even begin to describe. But I will say, it leaves you in a feeling life is more beautiful than before.
mhm,
So,
mhm. Meg has, it's not a question, it is a comment that I think is really important for more mention. Well, she said, when my mother, dad passed, my children followed me everywhere, concerned I might pass, as they love me too.
Very much
So I
so.
think that is such an important observation. Um, well, actually, back to you, Carole. Was that any of your experience?
Yes, in different ways, I have to say. But
Mm-hmm,
I think the
mm-hmm,
reality is that,
mm-hmm,
and I just heard this from my niece, who her dear friend had the loss of the baby, and
mm-hmm,
her daughter said to her when she heard about it, because she knew her friend's mommy was expecting a baby, and she said, "I didn't know babies could die."
mm. Wow.
And her mommy, very
Mm-hmm,
appropriately answered her. And then her little daughter said about her 2-year-old brother, "I don't want Conrad to die." And
mm,
so
mm-hmm,
immediately
mm-hmm,
her mind went
mm-hmm.
into, well, if that can happen,
Right.
what can happen to my brother or whomever, right? And so that
Right.
idea that we 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 engage right into, this could happen to me. This could happen
Yes.
to me.
Right.
Is very real,
Yes.
And
Right.
it
right?
And again,
and it
yeah.
could. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, John.
No, go ahead, Chair. Again.
I was just going to say it could and it has. And that's
Mhm.
what is
Yeah.
causing this, is because there was a sudden, unexpected death. And
Mm-hmm,
just the thought that I could lose someone so close to me.
mm-hmm,
How do I
mm-hmm.
know, like as Meg said, how do I know something's not going to happen to mom or mommy? And we
Mhm.
can't
Mhm.
promise that. The truth is that we
Right.
do all
Right.
die. We don't know when. So we
Right.
can have an open conversation about how, in the case of losing a child, that is, uncommon, but it does happen. And we could talk about how, I think sometimes what children are really asking is, how will I know? What if I'm at school and something
Yeah.
happens to mommy?
Yeah.
How am I going to
Right.
find out?
Mhm,
So I
mhm,
try to assure children, because I can't promise that I'm not going to pass or someone else in the family is not going to
Right.
die. But I can
Right.
say,
mhm,
if something was to happen, this is what happens next. So
Right.
if you're at
mhm,
school, someone's
Right.
going to pull you out of the classroom and share something has happened with you, and you're going to be taken home or wherever, to the hospital
Right.
if need. So
Right.
talk about those worst case scenarios, come up
Right.
with an emergency plan. We do this with all other crises, like if
Mhm.
there's a
Mhm.
tornado, if there's a
Mhm.
fire, if there's a school
mhm,
shooting. They're used
Mm.
to this kind of preparedness, and
Mm.
this gives them power in a situation where they feel
Mhm.
powerless. We have
Yes.
no control over death. We have no control over how that information is going to come to them. But if
Yeah.
you share
mhm,
with them the plan, how they're going to find out, even if it's in the middle of the night, someone's going to wake you up and you're going to find out right away.
Mhm.
And then
Mhm.
what are those next steps going to be?
mhm,
Right.
mhm.
I just want to point you all to the fact that Tara and Joan, and then another grief and bereavement person that I consulted with, have given me a lot of resource books for children and adults on ways that you can help explain things to them. And I have put that on my resource page on my website, healingpress.net, and you can take a look at that. And Tara added some that I'll be putting in tomorrow, so I'll complete that list again.
Mhm.
But one that did come to mind for me that I recently read was called Everyone Dies. It's a book for children, and they said 3 things, and I thought this was really interesting. Everyone dies,
Mhm.
and people who are very, very old die. People who are very, very hurt or
Mm.
very, very sick.
Yeah.
So it lays out this set of possible conditions for things that might happen.
Yeah. Right.
But in general, people die, but usually in those situations, but not
Yeah.
that they're not going to die. Everyone dies. And so
Mm.
that
Mhm,
list will be
mhm.
available to you as a resource guide for anyone who's interested in looking at resources for children, etc.
Yeah.
That will be there, and I'll add to it tomorrow. So we have a little more comprehensive list. But these are just
Mhm.
suggestions of what's worked for other people. So I hope you get something out of that.
Yes. Thank you. Can
Okay.
I just hook back for a moment, talking when we talked about culturally, there's kind of this cultural drive for us to move quickly through our grief,
Hmm. Hmm.
for so many reasons. This is just how we are as Western society, and also it makes people uncomfortable, all of those reasons. But I just
Right.
want to say, I've lived long enough to see the cultural shift of what we're doing tonight, that we
Yeah.
are having these
These
conversations.
conversations, yeah.
right.
And that we are including young people and children in the conversations, and that this book is an additional gift to the literature and to the experience for families to have. And at the one of the locations I work at is called a respite house in Colchester, right outside of Burlington, and there's 21 individual suites for people at the end of life. And just in the past week, we had a grandmother who was dying, and her grandson, who was about 12, was playing the guitar, playing folk songs for her as she was dying.
That's
In
beautiful.
another room, we had Sculpey being used to make thumbprints and fingerprints of a grandfather who was dying for the grandchildren. So I just also want to, again, in that yin yang of how far we need to go in the conversation, how far we've already come to, and just wanted to recognize that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
to thank you, Carole, for being a part of adding to this conversation in such a healing way.
Thank you. Yes, yes. I think I got a note from someone who read the book to their granddaughter, and she and her granddaughter was 4.5 years old, which was the book is not, of course, the age group is older, but she said what it did was it opened up the door for her to talk with her granddaughter. Her granddaughter started talking about her newly deceased dog and how she felt about it, and that is the idea, right? It's depicting real life grief with the opportunity to say, what does this mean for you? And one of the things that will be added also to my resource list on my webpage will be a list of kinds of questions that parents, grandparents, teachers, whomever might think about as they're, before they read the book, so they can think about how they might interact with their younger person about it. So as well. Hey, little Dave and Emma. Some of my fans, my great nieces and my nephew. So,
Oh,
but
wonderful.
I'm going to do a time check with Richard and Lynn and see where we are in the run of show. And our next, just be sure I'm okay on time. Okay, we're good on time. Okay. Any other thoughts or questions? Hi, hi, Jack from Nona. Hi, honey. How are you? And I think I might have missed Mia and Gabe, but hi to Mia and Gabe too. So, yes. So the other thing I wanted to say was, okay, so we have the book. We want to encourage other types, all kinds of readings, but it's just encouraging the conversation. And so children aren't uncomfortable with the conversation. Adults are. It's not children. I know me personally, I was uncomfortable with the conversation. I didn't know how to have the conversation properly. I wished I had had more resources available to me in another way for the children that I didn't have. But it's adults who need to really be thinking about their emotions and their feelings around all of these things, and how it's healthy and normal for kids to talk about that. We don't have to hide it from them. We don't have to keep them from going to rituals and services that, for example, that are being held. So any thoughts on that?
Yes, and I find that the most powerful conversations usually happen in the car. If you think about it, we are driving, our
Parallel,
eyes
yeah.
are ahead, we're on the wheel, we're focused on the traffic. And then
Absolutely.
our children will come out with these really powerful questions. They're straight to the point,
Yes.
and it feels out of nowhere for us, but they're thinking about it. They're not
Yeah.
driving. They're just
Right.
sitting in the car with
Right.
their thoughts, and then these questions come out like, what happens with the bones in the ground? Like, why did we bury grandma, and where do the bones go, and what's that about? It's like, I'm trying to drive. Oh my goodness. So it's
Like
usually
asking,
those
where
kind
do
of,
babies come from?
yes, same thing. Exactly. In the car, in the grocery store. So we could prepare ourselves, and we could sit down, and we could say, okay, read a book like this. And we could say,
Yes.
do you have any questions? And
Right.
there's a
Yes.
good, strong possibility they might say no.
Yeah.
However, Carole, as you mentioned earlier, children tend to kind of pop in and out of grief. So in that
Yeah.
moment, the book was really helpful. They had all their questions answered. Everything's okay. But later in the
Right.
car, when they're
Yes.
still processing it and still thinking about it, that's when those questions come out. So we have to be just open and available best we can. Of course, we're driving, but we
Right.
might have to say, I would really want to have, this is a very important question. I really want to talk to you about this. Can this just wait 5 more minutes? We're almost at our destination, and then I can give you my full attention.
That's
Or if
right.
you're able to answer it in the moment, that's great
Yes.
too. But don't be afraid to say,
Yeah.
this is really important and I want to talk about this.
That's
It's
right.
not a bad thing, but I just want to be able
Yeah.
to focus and drive safely right now.
Right.
So
Right.
just being available, being open, and being ready.
Excellent. Joan?
I'm not sure I can add anything to that.
Okay.
That was
Okay.
absolutely beautiful. My only thought might be when my 4 children were growing up and really didn't want to sit and look at sex ed books with me,
Right. Right.
I would leave them around the house. Okay, so
Smart,
just leave them around the house, and that would occasionally open up the conversation.
Right.
Maybe one
Right.
suggestion is to leave a book like that. Leave the books around for
Right.
for when, again, the readiness.
Right.
That's what I hear
And
us saying.
pictures too.
Definitely.
I love how
Definitely.
Rachel had the pictures on the wall. That opens up conversations too, having
Yes.
photos of your loved ones around.
Right. Yes.
Yeah, I see Linda. Hi, sis. How you doing there, Missy? She just said some of the most important conversations she's had with her kids were when she was driving. And I agree.
Yes.
There's this parallel protection, I call it. You're both facing forward, parallel to one another. No eye contact is happening.
That's
And
right.
so you get this protection built right in. So take advantage of that time, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
some of the most interesting things will happen, especially if they're in the front seat. Just don't let them do the driving at the time.
No, no.
You should be doing the driving. But anyway, so yeah, I agree. I totally agree. And I think Holly is saying something about the fact that her most powerful conversations were with her teenage niece and nephew in the car, and Holly's those 2 children had a death and their mother died, and that she was able to then really have, she was involved in their lives and was able to take them on various trips and journeys, and that gave her an opportunity for that. Thanks, Holly, for that. That's great. That's great. All right. Any other questions coming up? So, because we're coming to almost the end of our journey here together, and cannot tell you how powerful the conversation has been for me, but I hope it's been for others. And it may bring up questions for them. It may bring up ways to approach the process. Some of the books I put on the resource list are for adults, and I can remember, I think I read every single book on grief after my husband died, and I just couldn't get enough. I couldn't get enough. So having insight to that by reading them before those things happen, or we've all had losses, so they can always apply. It's not a bad idea. So there are names. Kenneth Doka comes to mind. He's a real big guru in bereavement and grief. Alan Warfelt. There's a variety of different people out there, but these books are usually really powerful in giving us this other life lesson and passages and understanding how things happen. And I think one of the other motivations for me was the fact that I'm older now. I'm 26 years older, and I can feel what I say to my husband: time is nipping at my heels. And so we begin to think about our own mortality and what we want that, what is that like for us? And I can remember my mother saying, when I'm not here, you're gonna wish this, that, or the other. And so the reality is we are here. Let's do what we can while we're here and make the best for the future and changing that for our children moving forward. And the desire for me to have a publishing company that can then focus on books that translate in maybe lighter ways about healing and emotions and feelings, so that can change it for their future ancestry. That's where I find this to be probably the most inviting and powerful for me, is in writing children's stories like that. So, my grandchildren are not short of ideas for children's stories. Trust me. So it's
Mhm, mhm.
beautiful engaging with them about all of this. So,
Thank you.
all
Thank you.
right. All right.
Um, I just want to add something to what a piece of a seed that you just said, Carol. We have spent such wonderful time here this evening, and when we take leave of one another, there may be some very powerful feelings that
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
already are emerging that are
Yeah.
I see in the chat, and that may come when we say our goodbyes, or may come in 3 or 10 or 15 days, depending
Yes.
on how that works for us. And so
Yes.
I think just to give voice to that, and to be mindful for everybody who's on this call,
Mm-hmm.
that there may be some feelings that will rise, and where is it that you go to reach out for support
Right.
when these feelings are
Right.
emerging for you. So just
Right.
wanted to name that.
Right. Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Could you bring up Elisa Quinn's comment there? Elisa has a comment because we had a member of our group who
Mm.
died a little bit ago. She says, just wanted to
Oh.
share how wonderful it's been to be a part of the conversation. Thanks for being here, Elisa. So well done. Petia from
Mm.
our Passion, Purpose, and Legacy Healing Circle most definitely has sent me many cardinals to let me know we're all still connected. And
Mm.
I think we, like you said, Joan, we all need to find what resonates with us in getting closer to understanding what's happening and our
Mhm.
emotions, our
Mhm.
reactions, our
Right.
responses, and being able to be in the
Mhm.
moment and stop and say,
Mm.
what just happened
Mhm.
there? Stepping back, asking ourselves a question. What's this about for me in
Right.
terms of some of my legacy, of my ancestry? What is it? And so
Mm.
I really think that's a valuable personal self-care step that
Mhm.
we can take for
Yes.
ourselves.
Yes.
And no one should have to grieve alone. So don't
No.
hesitate to reach
Excellent.
out, whether it's
Excellent.
a counselor, a support group, a friend,
Mhm.
or if
Mhm.
it's in the middle of the night,
Definitely.
journal, write out those feelings, use art, express yourself through
Yes.
music, through dance, through play, just
Yes.
Mhm.
to get it out of your
Definitely.
body
Mhm.
in a tangible way.
Mhm.
Definitely.
Mhm. Mhm. Mm.
Oh, Lynn just asked me a good question. Guidance on how to find a good bereavement counselor or a person who works in grief. Any good idea in their area? Because obviously people aren't um, just from this particular area. So any thoughts or ideas on what you would suggest?
I always recommend psychologytoday.com so you can select
Okay.
what therapists are in your area by your zip code that are accepting new clients, that accept your insurance, and you can select grief and loss. You could select trauma. You can select
Okay.
stress. You could select any
Mhm.
category.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great.
Mhm. That's a good tip.
Psychologytoday.com.
Yeah, that's a great reference
Mm-hmm.
resource. I know that our hospice agency gets numerous phone calls from people in the community.
Got it.
And again, for depending on what are we talking about? Adolescents, children, adult,
Mm-hmm.
either group or individual. So that's another resource I think in each community that also
Yeah.
has some folks to reach out
Yeah,
and support.
I think recognizing that loss looks like so many things. It doesn't just look like death, and that
Right.
we can
Yeah.
get support for any experience like that where there's a transition. It's support
Hmm.
for the transition and how it affects us and what does it mean. So yeah, I highly recommend it as well.
Hmm.
So
Hmm. Hmm.
okay, so are we? Oh, we have 6 winners, and can I read them, their names? Thank you so much for folks for contributing to the chat. Meg Martin Senecal, Courtney Mansk-Emkin, Kathy Hanna, Liz Mueller-Bruchak, sorry if I messed that up, Carmela Foglia, and Holly Cookus Michelson. I'll be reaching out to you all to get your information so that I can send you your prize. And did we do a drawing for anything on the book? Oh my gosh, she's got it all in there. I can tell. Lynn Wilson and Richard, who runs the Agora Media, and he has put this production on, and I cannot tell you what a gift having a person who has the technical savvy that he does, as well as just great ideas too. So Agora Media, that's Richard and Lynn, and he was amazing in helping me get to my ability to put this out here. So thank you so much, you guys. Okay, so we've got our winners. We've had an amazing conversation. I think we want to, I want to thank Joan. And if you have a parting message for us, Joan and Tara, now's the time to share it.
I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for being here, for being a part of this conversation. I love reading in the chat all the things you've done to stay connected to your loved one, to honor them, things you've done for your own self-care and to support your friends and family. So again, thank you to you, Carole. This book, I said earlier, like, this is really a gift. So I know it's called the Cardinal's gift, but it's really Carole's gift. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this. And thank you for this beautiful gift to all of us.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Joan, parting words?
Parting words are, actually, my parting words are going to be from one of my spiritual writers, and that's Meister Eckhart. Meister Eckhart was a mystic in the 14th century. And he wrote, if the only prayer you ever prayed was thank you, that would be sufficient.
Yes.
And so just to say thank you, Carole and Tara and Lynn and Richard and to everyone in the chat. And thank you for this opportunity to continue conversation. And my candle is also here, that we have been held in the light tonight. May we continue to be in the light.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joan. Thank you so much to both of you. And I think my parting words are more in relation to the overall bigger umbrella of healing, in that there are so many ways in which we can seek our own healing, whatever that might look like for you at that moment, but it comes in moments. It doesn't have to be big, large, traumatic life events. They come in small moments of gratitude, small moments of just offering up love, wherever that may be needed. And so that ripples into the world. And so we can impact a healing in the world with our own self-healing and moving that to the next step in our lives, whatever that looks like. And that those small moments, like paying attention to a cardinal tapping on the glass, are part of that healing. And just paying attention, I think that gives us a moment to breathe, be in the moment we're in. I hear my grandchildren say that all the time: just breathe, just breathe. Their parents are teaching them to breathe and take a moment, and it's going to be, let's just take a moment to step back. And it is so different, and it's beautiful, and I love it. And it's so different than any experience I had as a child, of being one of 9 in a family. But not that my parents weren't supportive, but it's just the idea that we weren't taught those things. And this is changing in our world, and I'm so grateful for it. And I want to be a part of it. And I'm really passionate about being a part of it. So thank you so much. So I want to just do a couple of things. I want to share a couple of reviews with you and how to find the book, and a quote at the end. So this I received from someone. My heart opened wide to this beautiful story, told in a gentle and compelling way. As a professional in the field of psychology, I would recommend this book to parents and families struggling to make their way through loss. The illustrations bring the story to life and deepen the feelings and experiences of reading it. Thank you, Carole Heaney, for this important work. Thank you. Yes. Next. Here is an illustration from the book, actually, and this was a comment. I read this book to my granddaughter, and it helped her to open up to me about her dog that just died. And it just so happens one of the giveaways, which is a children adult combo of books, is a book actually recommended by Joan called Dog Heaven. And it's there's also one called Cat Heaven, and it is for supporting children through a loss of their animal or their favorite pet. So. And then the last one is, first page hit me in the heart. Laying in bed, not wanting to go to school and face the day. Lost my dad when I was 13. Wish you wrote this way back then. And that's an illustration of Rachel, obviously, in the book. Very good. All right. And last, the book can be found online at Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, Walmart. And if you inquire at your independent bookseller, we can get them in there too. And they're locally becoming available in independent booksellers. But inquire and then just go to my website, healingpress.net, and you can contact me. So, and last but not least is a quote from the book. Love does not leave us when someone dies. It finds a forever home in our hearts. And I think this probably is the most powerful piece of this whole process for me. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. I cannot tell you how meaningful it is for me to be able to bring this to the world, but also to know that there are people interested in reading it. That probably became my greatest surprise. So thank you again for being here. And I'll contact the prize winners so I can get your prizes out to you. And namaste. Thank you.